For 5 years he spoke to no one but the wind. He didn't want company. He didn't want redemption. He just wanted the world to forget he ever existed. But then 11 women in uniform appeared at his gate, cold wounded, and on the run from their own command. What happened next would turn one forgotten ranch into a sanctuary, and one broken man into something he never thought he could be again. If stories of courage, healing, and second chances speak to your soul, consider subscribing to our channel. One click helps us keep sharing what matters, and we'd be honored to have you with us. Now, let's begin. For 5 years, Eli Morgan hadn't spoken to another living soul longer than a minute. The wind had become his conversation partner, the horses his only witnesses, and the silence that blessed heavy silence was the only thing that hadn't betrayed him. It was a January night when everything changed. The fire in the stone hearth popped and hissed, the only sound inside the log cabin, aside from the faint creak of wood cooling under the desert night air. Eli sat hunched over a worn leather saddle, running his fingers along the stitching, like a man who still believed in fixing what was broken. That belief was about to be tested. The knock came suddenly, hard, fast, desperate. He didn't move. No one came here. The ranch was 30 miles from the nearest paved road, 40 from town, and 5 years out of reach from the world that had taken his wife in a roadside wreck and his daughter through a custody battle he lost before he ever entered court. So no, people didn't knock. The second knock was louder. Then a voice. "Please, sir, we're not asking for much, just a roof for the night." A woman's voice, clear, commanding, but trembling. Eli rose slowly. His joints ached, not from age. He was only 43, but from isolation. His hand drifted instinctively to the old .357 revolver hanging in its holster by the door. He paused. Something about the voice, not frightened, not demanding. Something else. He looked out the narrow side window. Moonlight etched the figures in silver silhouettes. 11 of them, all women wearing military fatigues, muddy, torn heavy with fatigue. Some had visible wounds. One had a blood-stained bandage around her forearm. Another leaned against the porch rail like she'd collapse without it. But the one in front stood tall, shoulders squared, chin raised. Even in exhaustion, her bearing was unmistakable. A leader. She met his eyes through the warped window pane even before she spoke again. "Sir, we know you're in there. We mean no harm. We've been walking for 2 days." Eli's heart thudded. These weren't lost hikers or locals in need of gas. These were soldiers. Female soldiers. 11 of them. And something or someone was chasing them. He stepped back from the window. Could be a trap. Could be bait. Could be a story to get inside. But then he heard something he hadn't heard in 5 years. A child's cry. Faint. From somewhere behind the group. He leaned in again. And that's when he saw her, maybe 16, cradling something against her chest. A baby bundled tight, its face flushed and wet with cold. Eli Morgan closed his eyes. He saw again the paramedics pulling his wife's body from the wreckage. Heard again the gavel fall as the judge denied him even weekends with his daughter. And felt again that hollow ache, the kind only a man who's lost everything can truly understand. "If you don't help us," the woman said, "we won't make it till morning." He reached for the iron bar that locked the front door. It had stayed in place for 1,851 nights. Tonight it slid free. The door creaked open. The wind rushed in with the scent of mud, sweat, and something else, fear. For a moment, the woman on the porch didn't move. Neither did the others. Then she nodded, once respectful, not pitiful, and said, "Captain Ellie Carter, United States Army. These are my sisters." Eli nodded toward the open door. "Get in, quick." They moved fast but silently, as if trained to not disturb even the dust. Some limped, others helped the injured. The girl with the baby came in last, her face flushed and streaked with dried tears. Captain Carter remained on the porch, scanning the darkness beyond the barn. "They'll be here soon," she said. Eli asked only one question. "Who's after you?" Ellie turned to face him, and her eyes, gray and firelit, carried the weight of 1,000 miles. "Our own. What's left of them." She stepped inside, and Eli shut the door behind her. The lock slid back into place, but it meant something different now. Inside, the room grew smaller with life. The couch became a triage bed. The dining table became a map board. And the silence that had once guarded Eli's grief now cracked under the sound of whispered orders, clinking canteens, and a baby's tired whimpers. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He brought blankets, heated a pot of coffee, lit the second fireplace for the first time in years. But when Ellie Carter looked at him and said, "You don't know what you've just stepped into," Eli replied without hesitation. "Ma'am, I stopped knowing what I was in the day the world stopped knocking on my door." Eli hadn't seen this much movement in his home since the funeral. They moved with precision. Every soldier knew her role, even in fatigue. 2 set up a perimeter at the back windows. 1 took apart an old bookshelf to use as a makeshift barricade. Another, tall with a buzz cut and an aching limp, grabbed Eli's cast iron skillet and started heating snowmelt water over the fire to treat wounds. No questions. No wasted motion. Captain Ellie Carter stood in the center of it all, calling out quiet orders, like a woman who'd done this before, and more than once. But there was something in her face, just under the soot and dried blood, that betrayed the calm regret. Eli stood near the fire, silent, watching. The youngest soldier, barely more than a girl, sat curled in the corner with the baby. Her name, he'd later learn, was Riley. She was 19 and had signed up because her father had died in the service, and she thought that meant she owed something back. Now she rocked the infant like it was the last thing tethering her to this world. "That yours?" Eli asked gently. Riley blinked, startled, then shook her head. "We found her. Deserted. Her mother didn't make it." She looked away, swallowing hard. Eli didn't push further. He turned toward Ellie, who was now mapping lines on the dusty wooden floor, using nails and thread. It was a tactical grid: cover points, vulnerable approaches, fallback zones. "You planning to fight them?" he asked. "No," she said. "I'm planning to survive them." He paused. "And who exactly are they?" She stopped working and looked up at him. Her eyes weren't sharp now. They were tired. And old, in a way that had nothing to do with age. Joint Task Unit 7, Classified Special Ops. We were attached to a training mission outside Fallon, humanitarian logistics. But something changed. The orders, they weren't clean anymore. She stood, wiped her hands on her trousers. They asked us to remove a village that wasn't on any map. No hostels, just people. Farmers. Kids. When we refused, when we tried to report it, they labeled us non-compliant. Then someone issued a retrieval order. Eli exhaled through his nose. Retrieval. That's military speak for bring them in or bury the problem. The fire cracked sharply behind them. Sparks shot upward like tiny defiant stars. We ran, Ellie continued, for 47 hours straight. Lost contact with our support. And when we realized no one was coming to help us, we knew. We were the story they couldn't afford to let live. She stared out the window toward the black horizon. We were trained to serve. Now we're hunted like fugitives. Eli leaned on the mantel, rubbing the back of his neck. And you came here. Why, Ellie turned, slowly meeting his eyes. Because 5 years ago you built this house like a fortress. Because one of our instructors used to talk about a man named Eli Morgan, former Marine combat engineer decorated in 2 theaters, disappeared after a domestic tragedy, and never looked back. She softened just slightly. We didn't come here by accident. We came because we needed someone who knew how to stand their ground. Eli let the silence hang for a moment. Then he shook his head. You shouldn't be here. We don't have anywhere else left. He turned to stoke the fire, his movements sharp now. You brought them here. To my ranch. Do you understand what that means? If they find you here, if they find me, they won't ask questions. They'll assume I'm part of it. Harboring enemies. Ellie stepped closer, but her voice was calm. You've been hiding from the world for 5 years. But you don't strike me as the kind of man who forgot what's worth fighting for. Eli stared at her for a long moment. He didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, he walked to the closet under the stairs and opened it. Inside, untouched for years, hung his field jacket. The name Morgan still barely visible on the patch. Below it, a rusted metal trunk. He dragged it out and flipped it open. Tools, field gear, cold weather rations, a map kit, and beneath them, a radio unit sealed in waterproof wrap. You think they're coming tonight? He asked. Ellie nodded once. Scouts, maybe. An advance party. They'll want to assess before they strike. Then we have until sunrise. He handed her the radio unit. Get your team on this. Encrypt it. If someone's listening, they need to hear what really happened. As she took it, her fingers brushed his. Not romantic, not even tender. But in that single second of shared weight, shared risk, something passed between them. Something real. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, he muttered. Not yet. Later that night, while the rest of the house settled into a tense stillness, Eli stepped out onto the porch alone. The stars above were cold and endless. Somewhere in the valley below, headlights would eventually come. Maybe within hours. He lit a cigarette with trembling hands. He hadn't smoked in 3 years. He quit for his daughter. But tonight felt like a night for old habits and older wars. Behind him, the door creaked open. Ellie stepped out. Couldn't sleep, she asked. Didn't try. She folded her arms. What was her name? Eli didn't ask how she knew. Lena. My wife. And my daughter's name is Grace. She's 10 now. Lives in Tucson with her aunt. You talked to her. He shook his head. The court said I needed treatment first. Therapy, supervision. I never went. Felt like a fraud trying to be better when I didn't even feel alive. Ellie was quiet. Then she said, maybe tonight's the first step back. He laughed once. Funny how redemption knocks like thunder and wears combat boots. She smiled. No. Redemption walks quiet. But it knows how to find a door. They stood in silence as the wind shifted. And somewhere far off, a distant engine roared. The headlights came just after 3 a.m. They appeared at the crest of the southern ridge, 2 thin beams slicing through the darkness like knives hunting flesh. Then a third, a fourth. Not fast, but steady, controlled, professional. Eli stood in the barn loft, binoculars pressed to his eyes. The wind whistled through the loose boards behind him, dragging dust across the hay-strewn floor. He counted 7 vehicles. Not locals. Not police. Military. But unmarked. His jaw clenched. They found you, he whispered into the radio clipped to his collar. 7 trucks. Staggered. South side. They're coming in quiet. Ellie's voice came through almost instantly from the house. Copy. Lock phase 2. We hold position. Inside the house, her team had converted Eli's modest ranch into something resembling a forward outpost. Tripwires, watch stations, a choke point at the barn's side entrance, all laid out with surgical precision. But even so, they were outnumbered. And they all knew it. Eli took one last look at the creeping caravan, then made his way down the wooden ladder. His boots hit the ground with a soft crunch. As he walked briskly back toward the main house, the desert night pressed close, silent, star-frozen and watching. Inside, the tension was carved into every line on every face. Riley, now with the baby wrapped tightly against her chest, sat near the hearth, rocking in rhythm with the ticking of Eli's old wall clock. Joe and Naomi stood on opposite ends of the room, rifles, ready eyes flickering between the windows. Ellie stood at the dining table, now stripped bare and covered in hand-drawn maps and dirt-smeared field notes. Her face was lit only by the dim oil lamp, making her look older than 25. Eli stepped inside and closed the door behind him. They'll be here in 20, maybe less. They've cut their headlights now, trying to flank. Ellie looked up, calm as always, but something in her eyes flickered like an ember, trying to decide if it should burn out or ignite everything around it. "You still have a way out," she said quietly. "We won't think less of you." Eli didn't answer right away. He stepped beside the window and looked out into the dark. "You knew they'd come here, that this place would become the end of something." Ellie moved to stand next to him. "I didn't know if it'd be the end of us or the beginning of something better." He turned toward her. "Why me? Why my ranch? I was done. Spent. Half dead for years. You could have gone anywhere." Her voice softened, but it didn't break. "Because we needed someone who had already lost everything, and still knew how to fight for what mattered." Silence. Not heavy this time, but charged. A stillness before thunder. Then a sound far off but unmistakable. Boots in gravel. Ellie pulled back from the window. Positions. The first knock came soft, like a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. The second was louder. 3 sharp pounds. A voice followed. "This is Lieutenant Crow Federal Tactical Unit. You are harboring fugitives. Step outside with your hands visible, and you will not be harmed." Eli chuckled under his breath. That's not how they usually ask. "No," Ellie replied. "They don't usually ask at all." She nodded to Joe, who slipped into the hallway, rifle ready. Eli turned toward the door, took a breath, and said loud and clear, "There's no fugitives here. Only people who refuse to murder civilians. Maybe you're the one who ought to think twice about which side of history you're standing on." Silence. Then the voice again, colder. "Mr. Morgan, we are authorized to use lethal force. This is your last chance." Eli stepped back, hand hovering near the old Winchester mounted above the fireplace. But before he could reach it, Ellie's hand touched his shoulder. "Let them come," she whispered. "They don't know we've been waiting." Outside, the men fanned out. 6 of them. 2 at the barn. 2 circling wide toward the well. 2 approaching the porch. Standard sweep. They'd done this before, but they hadn't done it here. Eli's land was shaped by his grief. He had fortified it like a man trying to protect ghosts. Buried iron stakes near the trees, laced the back slope with wire, rebuilt his porch steps with pressure triggers he never thought he'd use. Until tonight. The first one tripped a wire. The explosion wasn't large, just enough to blind and disorient. The man dropped, writhing in the dust. The second tried to flank, only to find Joe waiting silent and still, until the muzzle flash lit up the trees like lightning. The team outside scattered in confusion. And from the shadows, Naomi's voice rang out. "Next step forward's your last." Back in the house, Ellie took the radio and keyed it. "This is Captain Ellie Carter of the United States Army Service ID 3267-59A. We are not deserters. We are not criminals. We have been targeted for refusing illegal orders. Everything is documented. This channel is being recorded." The response was static at first. Then, "We don't care who you are, Captain. This ends tonight." Ellie turned to Eli, her voice low. "Then we make them remember us." The firefight lasted only 6 minutes, but it stretched across time like a scar. By the end of it, 3 soldiers lay wounded, 1 dead. The others fell back, confused, unprepared. rattled. Inside, not one of the women was injured. The baby still slept. Ellie leaned against the doorframe, breathing hard, eyes locked on the retreating silhouettes. "They'll be back," she said. "Then we'll be ready," Eli replied. She looked at him, this man who had chosen stillness for 5 years, and saw something new in his stance. Not defiance, conviction. "We just made noise," she whispered. "Enough that someone's gonna start asking questions." Eli nodded. "Then let them ask. I'm done hiding." He stepped outside into the moonlight, and for the first time in half a decade, he wasn't afraid of what might come next. At dawn, silence returned to the ranch, but it was no longer peaceful. The porch still carried the scent of gunpowder and singed pine. The dirt yard bore boot prints and drag marks where bodies had been carried away in the night. Blood had darkened the gravel in streaks that would take weeks of rain to erase. Inside the house, no one slept. Not really. Eli sat at the kitchen table pouring stale coffee into a chipped mug. His hands trembled just a little, not from fear, but from something heavier. Memory. Familiar weight returning to a man who'd spent years trying to forget what it felt like. Ellie stood near the door, boots, muddy sleeves, rolled arms crossed. 3 wounded, 1 KIA. They left faster than they came. She looked out toward the distant hills. But they'll regroup, and next time they'll come ready. Eli nodded slowly, not looking up. "They thought you'd be unarmed. They thought I'd be a coward. You proved them wrong." He stared into the black surface of the coffee like it could offer a prophecy. "No, I proved them right. I am dangerous. That's what makes me useful now." Ellie watched him carefully. There was something in his voice, an edge, like metal being pulled across bone. "What did you do before this, Eli?" He smiled faintly. Not proud, not sad, just weary. "Combat engineer, yes. That's the part people know." He sipped, swallowed. "But later, during the post-deployment reassignment, they put me into reconnaissance, deep field ops, counterintelligence with flexible parameters, which means, it means, I've seen what happens when good intentions become collateral damage." Ellie walked slowly to the table and sat across from him. The air between them held something new. Now, not suspicion, but a quiet acknowledgement they had both been shaped by wars that never made headlines. "Did you ever kill anyone you shouldn't have?" she asked. He didn't blink. "Yes, and I've been trying to figure out how to live with that ever since." She didn't flinch. "Good. That means you're exactly who we need right now." Later that morning, Riley found something in the bushes behind the barn. A satellite phone crushed, half buried in the dirt. "It wasn't ours," she told Ellie. "And it wasn't dropped by any of the ones we fought." Ellie turned the damaged casing over in her hands. It was marked with D7, a designation not assigned to ground forces. "They had eyes on us before they even came over the ridge," she murmured. Eli stepped closer. "Someone's feeding them intel. Not someone in my unit." "No, higher up. Someone with clearance." The air shifted. What had once been a cat and mouse pursuit was starting to look like a coordinated erasure. And suddenly, it was no longer just about survival. It was about truth. "We need to get word out," Ellie said. "Someplace above their reach." Eli nodded. "Then we don't just hold the ranch. We make it loud. We turn it into a signal fire they can't ignore." By noon, the soldiers had turned the barn into a command post. Eli gave up his entire attic for storage, dug out an old generator from the storm cellar, and showed Naomi how to bypass the ancient circuitry to power the uplink. Joe and Tess wired makeshift antennae using cattle fencing and a salvaged car battery. The whole ranch hummed with quiet purpose. But Eli was digging. Out behind the shed, he opened a place he hadn't touched in years. A small root cellar hidden under plywood and dry hay. Inside were crates wrapped in oilskin sealed against time. One held tools. One held communications gear. The third held explosives. He stood there a long moment, hand resting on the crate. Then he lifted it out. That night, Ellie found him in the workshop stripping fuses with deliberate care. "Are we really doing this?" she asked. "If they come again, they'll bring numbers, firepower, surveillance. You're preparing for a war." Eli shook his head. "I'm preparing for the moment they forget I've fought one before." She studied him. Not the hands calloused, skilled, measured. She looked at his face, a face carved by grief, set in stone for years. But now the cracks were showing, and through them, light. "What do you really want, Eli?" He didn't answer at first. Then, to see my daughter again, and not feel like a stranger. He looked up. His eyes weren't soft, but they weren't hard either. "And if I have to burn down everything I used to be to give her a world where men like Maddox don't get to bury truth beneath paperwork, then so be it." Ellie stepped closer. "We fight together, Eli. You're not alone in this. You brought the fire," he said. "I'm just the match." At 2:47 a.m., the signal went out. A broadcast, encrypted and direct, containing Ellie's testimony, names, coordinates, proof. Her voice rang through military satellites like a ghost from inside the system. "This is Captain Ellie Carter. If you're hearing this, I may already be dead. But you need to know the truth. It was raw, brave, precise, and it was enough to make powerful men nervous. Because now the question wasn't whether they could silence her. The question was how much louder that silence would become." The signal was out for less than 9 minutes. But that was long enough. Somewhere over Nevada, a military satellite blinked. In a windowless command center outside of D.C., a young analyst wearing a borrowed tie paused mid-sip of his vending machine coffee and frowned. "Ma'am, we just picked up an unsecured broadcast on a ghost channel. Origin, Southern Texas. Sender claims to be active duty." The supervisor, a woman with crow's feet and a voice like crushed gravel, stood slowly. "Playback." Now, back on the ranch, silence fell again. Not the hunted kind, the kind that comes after a flare's been lit, and no one knows who saw it. Eli stood by the window scanning the far ridges. No movement, no dust, no headlights, but he could feel it like an old injury aching before a storm. "What now?" Riley asked, holding the baby against her chest. Naomi answered before Ellie could. "Now we wait, and pray that someone still up there remembers how to care." Hours passed. They took turns on the watch. Ellie stayed near the radio. Joe polished her sidearm with the obsessive calm of a soldier who'd survived too much. Tess began quietly writing names in a little green notebook. Names of the fallen, of the betrayed, of those they carried forward. Eli went to the shed. He worked. By noon, he'd rewired the generator, reinforced the barn rafters, and welded a collapsible choke barrier at the back road. Sweat dripped down his temples. Grease darkened his palms. His heart beat with an intensity he hadn't felt since his deployment. When Ellie came to check on him, she found him muttering to himself as he wrapped copper wire around a horseshoe. "You're not going to sleep, are you?" she asked. "Haven't earned it yet. We might have already done enough." "No," he said. "Enough means they stop chasing kids with guns. Enough means your story makes someone in D.C. lose their desk job. Until then, I build." Ellie hesitated, then stepped closer. Her voice dropped. "You're not doing this just for us." He didn't look up. "No. For Grace." A pause, then a nod. "I want her to grow up in a country where people still fight for what's right, even when it costs them everything. I want her to hear my name, and not just think he left." That silence returned again, not heavy, but sacred. Then Naomi's voice came over the walkie. "Captain, you need to hear this. It's Channel 14. In the living room, everyone gathered. The radio hissed, then cleared. A calm, clipped voice broke through, confirming we've received partial transmission from Captain Ellie Carter, verified credentials. We are attempting contact. Hold position and do not engage unless fired upon. Marshals en route. I repeat, marshals en route. For a full second, no one breathed. Then Joe let out a low whistle. Well, damn. They heard us. Not just heard, Ellie said, her voice cracking ever so slightly. They believed us. Eli smiled, but it faded quickly. That's good. But it means someone else heard it too. Ellie's eyes narrowed. Maddox. And if he's half the man I think he is, he won't wait for a badge to knock first. By evening, the mood on the ranch shifted. Hope crept in. Just enough to be dangerous. Joe made cornbread from Eli's storm supplies. Riley found an old Polaroid camera and snapped a blurry shot of the baby sleeping in a makeshift cradle made from an ammo crate and a wool blanket. They laughed quietly, carefully, but it was laughter nonetheless. Even Eli sat on the porch, sipping warm beer with Ellie beside him. You always drink in the middle of battle prep, she teased. Only when there's a sunset like that. They watched in silence as the sky bled gold and orange over the horizon. The land stretched endlessly before them, dusty, battered, enduring. You know, Eli said I used to think the worst part of grief was the silence. But it's not. Ellie looked over. What is? The way the world keeps moving after everything you loved stops. The mail still comes. The grass still grows. But inside, it's winter. Ellie didn't say anything right away. Then maybe tonight is spring. He turned to her. Her eyes were wet, but not broken. Fierce. They sat that way until the sun was gone and the night reclaimed the land. At 11:42 p.m., a new sound tore through the quiet. Rotors. Not helicopters too low, too sharp. Drones, fast, high-tech, built to surveil and strike. Eli stood. Ellie was already moving. They're not waiting for marshals, she said. Then, neither are we, Eli replied. He grabbed the flare gun from the porch drawer and fired into the sky one long red streak. It was a signal, not for help, but a warning. This ground is no longer yours. Inside, the women assembled like clockwork. No panic, no shouting, just formation, command, resolve. Ellie turned to them, her voice clear. We hold. If they engage, we respond with minimal force. We record everything, and we stay alive. Eli stood beside her. For the first time, he didn't feel like a man watching someone else's fight. He felt like a soldier again. Not just any soldier, the man they didn't expect. The drones came first, not as weapons, but as eyes. 3 of them silent and fast, slicing across the night sky, like hawks searching for wounded prey. Inside the house, everything fell into place. Riley shielded the baby under the stone hearth. Joe and Tess moved to the second-floor windows, rifles poised, but barrels down. Naomi kept her focus on the signal repeater, making sure the broadcast line stayed open no matter what. Eli and Ellie stood in the center of it all, shoulder to shoulder, as the wind shifted direction. They're looking, Ellie said, voice low. They'll find us, Eli replied, but not what they expect. Outside, the ranch was still. No movement, no sound, but the faint thrum of the drones overhead. Then came the trucks. 5 of them. No headlights this time, just the dull purr of diesel engines crawling up the eastern trail like wolves in formation. Each vehicle held armed men, private contractors, likely disavowed in case of fallout. No markings. No names. Just wore in civilian clothes. Eli watched from the living room window. Not federal, he murmured. These aren't marshals. Then Maddox isn't playing defense anymore, Ellie said. He's coming to erase us. She turned to the women. Positions. No lethal fire unless they do first. Body cams on. Comm lines open. She looked at Eli. You sure about the floodlights? One switch. Full perimeter. Let's make them think we've been waiting. Ellie smirked. We have. At exactly midnight, the convoy stopped 200 yards from the front gate. Men dismounted, fanned out. One of them, a tall figure in a tan tactical vest, walked slowly toward the gate with hands raised. He stopped just outside the reach of the lights, his face half in shadow. Then he spoke. Captain Carter. Eli Morgan. This doesn't have to end badly. You're surrounded. Lay down your weapons. Come out slowly. Eli recognized the voice, not because he'd heard it before, because he'd heard men like that his whole life, calm, trained, deadly, and wrong. He stepped onto the porch. You must be Maddox. A pause. You're not in a position to negotiate, Mr. Morgan. Not negotiating, Eli replied. Just making sure I know the name of the man who's going to hell first. The lights clicked on blinding flood beams mounted across the fence posts, illuminating the men like animals on a stage. The ranch came alive. Every window revealed a silhouette. Every soldier inside ready, but still no one fired. Maddox didn't blink. You don't understand what's at stake here. Sure I do, Eli said. You kill the story before the story kills your career. These women disobeyed orders. They endangered national security. Eli took a step forward. They refused to murder civilians. The only thing they endangered was your secret. Another pause. If you don't come out, we'll enter by force. And what happens next won't be quiet. Eli's voice was low but unshaking. You've brought guns to the wrong kind of war. The first shot wasn't fired by Maddox. It came from a man stationed near the well, nervous, twitchy, trigger-happy. A crack split the night. The bullet tore through Eli's front gate and buried itself in the porch beam 6 inches from his head. Weapons, hot, someone yelled. Then everything shattered. Bullets rained against the barn, shattering the upper windows. Sparks flew from the generator shed. A smoke grenade arced through the night and landed in the dry trough beside the house, hissing poison. But inside the ranch, calm held. Ellie barked orders with crisp, surgical precision. Joe, suppress right flank. Tess, eyes on the barn. Riley, stay with the child. Naomi, keep the feed live. Eli ducked behind the porch column and flipped a buried switch on the side panel. A deep thud shook the ground. Barriers rose from the dirt, reclaimed steel gates he'd welded months ago, meant to protect nothing but memories. Now they were saving lives. Let them come, he growled. The firefight lasted 12 minutes, long enough to change everything. One contractor was hit in the leg, taken out by Joe's warning shot through a sandbag. Another tried to flank the barn and tripped a homemade caltrop rig Eli had buried days ago. Screamed like a banshee before passing out from shock. Still the attackers pressed, until Ellie stepped through the smoke rifle slung low body cam flashing red. She walked directly into Maddox's sightline. Call them off, Colonel. It's over. You don't give orders anymore, he snarled. Neither do you. Your voice is already in D.C. Your crimes are out. You shoot now, and you sign your own death warrant. You think anyone's coming to save you. No, she said. I think someone's already listening. At that exact moment, the sound arrived, not of gunfire, but of rotors, thunderous, low, impossible to mistake. 2 federal helicopters broke over the ridge. Bright spotlights hit the ranch. Loudspeakers blared, "Stand down." Federal authorities on site. Drop your weapons and place your hands on your head. Chaos erupted among Maddox's team. Some complied. Some ran. A few dropped to their knees before they were ordered. Maddox stood still, his jaw clenched. You had no right, he hissed. Ellie stared him down. We had every right. You lost yours when you made murder standard operating procedure. Behind her, Eli stepped forward and said quietly, And now, Colonel, you're surrounded. 30 minutes later, Maddox was in cuffs. So were 3 of his men. The marshals didn't ask many questions. They already had the answers. Ellie's broadcast had made it to a sympathetic ear in the Pentagon. That ear had sent a warning. That warning had become action. As dawn broke over the ranch, light spilled across the wreckage, burned grass, broken barriers, and faces, caked with dirt and tears. But no one died. Not tonight. Not on this ground. Eli stood at the edge of the field, watching the helicopters lift off. Ellie stood beside him, arms folded. "Think they'll come again?" she asked. "If they do," he said, "they'll find something stronger than fences and firepower." She looked over. "What's that?" He met her eyes. People who finally stopped being afraid. The morning after the raid, the ranch was quiet, in a way that didn't feel like fear. It felt like breath returning to lungs that hadn't drawn air in years. Smoke still curled from the western fence, where one of Eli's homemade flares had scorched the dried brush. Bullet holes dotted the barn walls like scars on old skin. The wind carried the scent of gun oil and singed cotton, but beneath it earth. Rain had come sometime before dawn. Just a passing drizzle, but enough to awaken the scent of soil. Eli stood in the field with a shovel in hand. He wasn't digging for protection anymore. He was digging for truth. Behind him, Ellie approached her steps, slow hands in her jacket pockets. "You know," she said softly, "when someone grabs a shovel this early in the morning, they're either grieving or preparing for a resurrection." He didn't look up. Maybe both. She waited in silence as he pried open the corner of an old cedar box buried beneath the oak tree. Inside, photos, dozens of them, curled at the edges, a child's yellow rain boots, a drawing of a stick figure family labeled Dad, Mom, Me, a photo of a younger Eli in uniform holding a baby girl in a hospital blanket. He didn't speak, just handed the photo to her. She took it gently. "Grace," he said. Ellie's eyes softened. "You buried her here." Eli shook his head. "No, she's alive, in Tucson, lives with her aunt. I wasn't ready to be her father after Lena died." "So you buried what the proof she ever needed you." He looked away, jaw tightening. "No," he whispered. "I buried the version of me that could have hurt her by trying too soon." Ellie sat on the nearby stump photo still in her hand. "You want to know what I see in this picture?" she asked. He raised his eyebrows. "I see a man who was there, who showed up, who held his daughter with 2 hands and no armor. And I see a man who's still standing here now despite every reason not to." Eli leaned on the shovel, breathing through the ache behind his ribs. "The night she was born," he said, "I thought, this is what I was made for. Not the medals, not the deployments, just this. Holding her." He exhaled slowly. "And then, I couldn't hold anything anymore." Ellie didn't speak. She let him have the silence, the good kind this time. "Do you think," he asked, voice low, "a man can find his way back after all this?" She stood, stepped closer. Her hand reached for his, not to take, but to steady. "I think if a man can stand on broken ground and still offer shelter to strangers, he's already on the road back." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly he nodded. And in that nod, the soil shifted internally and underfoot. Back inside the house, Joe and Naomi were repairing the shattered window in the pantry. Tess was on the porch, carving names into the post beside the swing names of those they'd lost. Riley had fallen asleep on the rug, the baby curled against her chest like a heartbeat. For the first time since they arrived, the women weren't planning defense. They were building. Ellie watched them from the hallway, arms crossed over her chest, expression unreadable. Eli stepped up beside her. "Feels different now." "Because it is," she said. "You think they'll leave us alone?" She shook her head. "Maddox is in custody. But he was just a symptom. The sickness runs deeper." Then what he asked. Then we stay loud. We don't let the silence cover us again." He nodded. "You'll go public." "We already did." "No, I mean national. Names, testimony." Ellie exhaled through her nose. "If I do that, they'll come after me in other ways. Legally, politically. I won't get to keep what's left of my life." Eli looked at her, truly. Looked. "What do you want to keep?" She hesitated. For the first time, he saw vulnerability slip through the cracks of her soldier's shell. "I want to hold a life that doesn't always feel borrowed. I want to walk somewhere without checking for snipers. I want—" She trailed off, then laughed once, dry and raw. "I want to learn how to fix a fence post instead of breach a perimeter." He smiled. "Fences are harder than they look." "So am I," she said, stepping just a little closer. They didn't touch. Not yet. But they didn't move apart either. That afternoon, a black SUV arrived at the edge of the property. 2 federal marshals stepped out, clean suits, steel-eyes briefcases in hand. Captain Carter, one asked. "Yes. We've been instructed to debrief your team on site and offer temporary protection under federal witness classification." "And Eli Morgan." The man paused. "Mr. Morgan's actions are under review. But off the record, he's got friends now." Eli stepped forward. "What happens next?" "We make your story public. The Pentagon's reviewing everything. The Oversight Committee's already drafting inquiries. Maddox is just the first domino." Ellie nodded, then let it fall. That evening, as the last rays of sunlight swept across the ranch, Eli returned to the tree where he'd buried his past. He didn't rebury the box. He placed it on the porch beside the front door, visible waiting open. A symbol of what he had lost and what he was willing to reclaim. Behind him, Ellie joined him. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him and leaned slightly toward his shoulder. "The war we just fought," she said, "that wasn't the hard one." "No," he agreed. "The hard one is learning to stay after the fighting stops. You think we'll win that one?" He looked down at her hand, now resting just inches from his. And for the first time in years, Eli Morgan reached out not as a soldier, not as a protector, but as a man choosing to live again. He took her hand gently. "We've got a chance." The phone rang just before dusk. It was the kind of sound that didn't belong on a ranch like this, sharp, modern, too clean. Most days, Eli kept the landline unplugged. It was a relic he couldn't quite throw away like the battered flannel in his closet or the field journal on his nightstand. But today, the phone was plugged in, and it was ringing. Ellie looked up from the table where she was patching Riley's torn jacket. Joe froze halfway through sharpening her knife. Eli stood in the hallway, staring at the receiver like it had grown teeth. "You gonna get that?" Ellie asked. He didn't answer. Not right away. The ringing kept going. 1, 2, 3. Finally, he walked over and picked up. "Hello." A pause. Then a woman's voice, measured, guarded, but familiar. "Eli. It's Dana. I wasn't sure this number still worked." Dana. His sister-in-law. The woman who'd raised Grace since the funeral. The woman who had told him kindly but firmly to stay away until he was ready to be a father again. His mouth felt dry. His voice caught. "It still works." Another pause. Then I saw the news. Eli's heart sank. So it had begun. The ripple. The truth didn't just stay in D.C. It traveled like wildfire, especially when it involved rogue soldiers and a former Marine in a shootout with shadow units. "I guess you're not hiding anymore," she said. "No," he admitted. "I'm not." There was something in her tone that surprised him. Not anger, not disappointment. Something closer to awe. "You protected those women. They protected each other. I just gave them a place to stand. It mattered, Eli. Grace saw it." His hand gripped the receiver tighter. She saw it. The broadcast made national. Clips, at least. It's everywhere. Your name. Your face. What did she say? Dana hesitated. She asked if the man in the video was really her dad. I told her yes. Eli's breath caught. The living room faded. The weight of the moment pressed behind his eyes. What else, she asked, if she could talk to you? He had faced armed men, drones, corrupt officers. But nothing made his chest seize like that sentence. Now he whispered, "If you're ready." He closed his eyes, then opened them. "Yeah, I'm ready." A moment of static, then a softer voice, high, tentative. "Hello?" Eli swallowed. His voice broke a little. "Hi, sweetheart." Another pause, then a quiet giggle, shaky but real. "You sound like I remember." His knees nearly gave out. He sank onto the old wooden bench beside the window. "I've missed you every single day," he said. "I know. Aunt Dana told me. I didn't know how to come back. Are you coming now?" He looked out the window. The sky was purple cracked with orange. Ellie stood by the barn, arms crossed, watching the sunset. The baby slept in Riley's arms beside the fence. The land was bruised but breathing. "I think I already started," he said. Grace was silent for a second. "I drew you a picture," he smiled. "What's in it?" "A house, and a dog, and a girl holding her dad's hand." His throat tightened. "I'd really like to see that." "Then you gotta come visit." "I will," he said. "I promise." "Okay," she whispered. "I'll wait." That night, Eli stood alone by the oak tree where the cedar box had once been buried. The air was cool, clean. The scars on the land still fresh, but no longer raw. Ellie joined him quietly. "That call," she asked. "My daughter." She blinked. She called. She saw the broadcast. She wants to see me. A slow smile tugged at Ellie's mouth. "You gonna go?" "Yeah, but not yet. I've got fences to mend first." She looked out over the ranch. "We'll hold it down." He turned to her. "I meant you too." She stilled. "What do you mean?" "I mean I want to come back to something real. Something more than survival. And I don't know what this is between us, but I'd like to find out." Ellie's eyes didn't waver. "You think a woman like me knows how to be anything other than a soldier? I think a woman like you is the only kind who knows how to love in a war." For a moment, the wind didn't move. The night held its breath. Then quietly she stepped closer. Their fingers touched, first light, tentative. Then her hand slid into his, and they stood like that under the branches beneath the stars. No vows, no confessions, just two people finding their way back. Inside, Riley tucked the baby into a box lined with old blankets. Joe poured 2 fingers of whiskey for herself and 1 for Naomi. Tess leaned against the doorway, humming a tune that had no words. The house wasn't just standing. It was full. Of sound. Of people. Of life. For the first time, Eli felt it. He wasn't a man guarding ghosts anymore. He was a man coming home. A week passed. No gunshots. No black trucks. No helicopters. Just sun, wind, and the long stretch of quiet that always comes after everything breaks. And yet, no one left. The women stayed. They fixed what was broken, painted what had been ignored. Ellie led drills in the early morning light, not because she had to, but because routine made things feel real. Joe reinforced the barn's doors with scrap steel. Tess wrote a mission log that read, more like poetry than procedure. Naomi taught Riley how to sterilize gauze with herbs, then how to laugh without permission. The baby, now affectionately called Poppy, slept better than any of them. As for Eli, he spent his days somewhere between rebuilding and remembering, and trying tentatively to imagine a future he hadn't planned on. One afternoon, Ellie found him mending the pasture fence, shirt off, back sunburnt, hammer in hand. "You know we're not under siege anymore," she called, arms folded over the top rail. I know he grunted, driving a nail through old cedar. Then why are you still fortifying the perimeter? He straightened, wiped sweat from his forehead. Because it's easier than thinking about what comes next. She stepped inside the pen boots, crunching dry earth. And what comes next, Eli? He paused, held her gaze. That's the part I've never been good at. Planning staying. They stood in silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because the words mattered too much to waste. I leave in 2 weeks, she said finally. Orders request. Voluntary assignment. Base in Colorado wants me to help rebuild a veteran transition unit. They think I'm some kind of poster girl now. Eli chuckled. You are? Don't remind me. A hawk circled overhead. Somewhere far off, wind chimes sang from an old porch. They want me to go. But for the first time, she hesitated. I don't know if I want to. Eli leaned against the post, heart heavy in his chest. So stay. She didn't answer immediately. Her face, usually unreadable, flickered with something raw. You make it sound simple. It is simple, he said. Just not easy. She stepped closer, her voice softer now. You think this, she gestured between them, works in the real world with my ghosts with yours. He didn't hesitate. No, not unless we build it, every damn day, like this fence. And when it falls, then we stand it up again. She studied him, not the man with scars, not the soldier, but the father, the builder, the man who had once buried hope and was now daring to dig it back up. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table long after the others had gone quiet. The old radio hummed static. The smell of chamomile and warm earth clung to the air. He opened Grace's drawing again, the one Dinah had mailed the next day after their call. A house, a dog, a girl holding a man's hand. In crayon, she'd written one word beneath it. Us. He didn't cry, not because he didn't feel it, but because what filled him now wasn't sorrow. It was hunger. To be better. To be present. To be worth the second chance life had offered. He looked out the window toward the barn where Ellie slept with her boots by the door, and her hand never far from a weapon. He didn't want to wake up one day and find she was gone, not because of duty, but because he never gave her a reason to stay. The next morning he made breakfast. Pancakes, burnt edges, too much cinnamon. Ellie entered the kitchen, hair damp from the basin wash outside. She stopped when she saw the table. What's this, a bad apology, he said, and a decent start. She smiled, touched her fingers to the edge of the plate. You're not a bad cook. I'm not a good talker either. But I'm learning. She sat. He poured 2 coffees. For a while they ate in silence. Then, what if I asked you to come with me? She said, not looking up. Eli froze. To Colorado, she nodded. I don't know what it would look like, just, I'd like to try, not alone. He didn't answer right away, because something inside him stirred a tension between the land that had rebuilt him and the woman who had reminded him how to be. He glanced toward the oak tree outside, then back to Ellie. You gave me a reason to stay, he said. Now maybe it's time I gave you one to return. She looked up, eyes shining, but steady. Is that a yes? It's a maybe, he said. And a promise to figure out the rest together. She raised her mug. I'll drink to that. 2 days later, Eli drove her to the station. The others came too. Joe Naomi Riley, with Poppy Tess holding the Polaroid from their first day of safety. Ellie stood with her duffel bag slung over one shoulder, boots dusted with Texas red clay. She turned to Eli. So what happens next? He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded paper. That's the deed to this land. I added your name to it. Her breath caught. Eli, don't read into it. Just a reminder. This is your ground too. She took it gently. You sure know. But I'm tired of waiting for sure. They stood there until the train's horn cut through the silence. She kissed him, then nothing desperate. Nothing unfinished. Just real. "Find me when you're ready," she whispered. "I already have." And with that, she was gone. Eli stood on the platform long after the train disappeared. Not alone. Not broken. Just here. For the first time in years, he was staying not to run from the past, but to build something that could outlive it. The letter came on a Wednesday. It wasn't elegant, just a folded sheet of lined paper stuffed into a yellow envelope with no return address. But Eli knew the handwriting the moment he saw it. Tight. Slanted. Precise, like every field note she ever scribbled across a map. He opened it slowly like something sacred. "Eli, you told me once that staying is harder than leaving. You were right. I thought Colorado would feel like purpose, but it just felt like waiting. For news. For orders. For something to feel like home." And then one morning I woke up and realized I already knew where that was. I'm coming back, not as a soldier, not because I lost a war, but because I finally believe I'm allowed to win one. Ellie. He sat on the porch for a long time after reading it, hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the dirt road stretching beyond the ranch like a vein of memory. Riley came up behind him, baby Poppy now nearly crawling. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, voice soft. "Someone's coming home." It took her 3 more days. He didn't ask when, didn't call, didn't write back. He just prepared, the way a man does when something matters again. He fixed the hinges on the barn door she used to prop open with her boot, painted the porch swing she liked to sit on while sharpening her blade, rewired the fuse box she always complained about during storms. And for the first time in years, he unpacked the second pillow in his bedroom. She arrived just after sunset. Same truck, same boots, same duffel. But not the same woman. Her hair was longer, sun-kissed, her face softer in places, sharper in others. And when she stepped out, Eli didn't move to greet her. He waited watching. Until she said, "You gonna stare or say something?" He smiled. I didn't think I had to say anything. "You don't," she said, and then walked straight into his arms. No words, no delay. Just the thud of hearts that had waited long enough. That night, they sat on the porch, watching the wind play in the high grass. Poppy giggled somewhere inside the house. Naomi's laugh echoed behind her. Joe had taken to carving chess pieces from leftover firewood. Tess played a slow tune on a guitar someone had donated. Riley painted names on a barn wall like a mural of memory. The ranch had changed, not just rebuilt, but reborn. Ellie looked out across it all. "You built something here." Eli nodded. "We did. It feels permanent." He took a sip of cold coffee, then set the mug down. "Permanent's not a place. It's a decision." She turned to him. "And you decided." "Yeah. I decided the man who kept pushing people away wasn't who I wanted to be anymore." A pause. Then he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, creased, worn, folded at the corners. It was Grace's drawing. This kept me grounded when everything else wanted to drift. Ellie smiled. "You ever give it back to her? It doesn't belong to her anymore." He looked over. "It belongs to us now. What we're building." She reached out slowly and took his hand. "You sure?" "Yeah. Because this," she squeezed gently. "Only works if you're all in." He didn't answer with words. He leaned in, and for the first time since she returned, kissed her like a man not afraid of what comes next. Later, they sat curled together in the porch swing. No war talk, no strategy, no battle fatigue. Just 2 people choosing to exist in the same moment. And then Ellie whispered something he didn't expect. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," he teased. "What if we turned the barn into a recovery lodge for women like us? Veterans, survivors, people with nowhere else to land." He blinked. "That's a big ask. I'm not asking." He looked at her, saw it not ambition but calling. She wasn't done serving. She was just done hiding while she served. We'd need help. Permits. Funding. Already emailed 3 organizations. "You're serious? I've never been more." He paused, then chuckled. "You're gonna drag me kicking and screaming into being useful again, aren't you?" She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You already are." In the weeks that followed, the ranch became something more. A sign went up at the gate, Red Oak Haven. For those who fought and still fight, a small website. A GoFundMe, a few calls. Then donations came. Then letters. Then women. A Marine with a limp and a welding license. A mother of 2 escaping PTSD and homelessness. A nurse dishonorably discharged for speaking truth too soon. They came. And the ranch made room. So did Eli. So did Ellie. One morning months later, Grace arrived with Dana. The girl was taller now. Braver. She stepped out of the car with wide eyes and careful hands. Eli bent down, nervous like a boy on a first date. "Hi," he said. Grace looked up. "Do I get a tour?" He blinked, then grinned. Yeah, you do." And as she slipped her hand into his, something clicked into place, not like a lock, but like a door finally opening. They came in 2s and 3s at first, not with sirens, not with banners, but with silence, with stories packed in duffel bags and strapped to their shoulders, with eyes that scanned the land like they were asking permission to breathe again. Eli stood by the old gate, hand resting on the new sign, Red Oak Haven, a place to begin again. It had only been 6 months since Ellie came back, since the letter, since the porch swing kiss that cracked open the sky. But in that short time, the ranch had become something more than a place. It had become a threshold. Joe now ran daily training sessions for the newcomers, teaching them how to hold a hammer or how to hold their own voice again. Naomi ran point on medical logistics. Riley worked part-time at the local clinic and part-time chasing Poppy, who had officially learned to walk and refused to stop. Tess published her first book, a memoir in verse about battlefields and baby bottles. And Ellie, she led the sunrise gatherings. Every morning at 6:15 before the light cleared the hills, they'd gather, veterans, widows, runaways, the soul-weary, and she'd say just one thing: "You are not what you survived. You are what you choose to build now." No one clapped. They didn't have to, because healing didn't need applause. One autumn morning, Eli sat with Grace beneath the oak tree, where everything had once been buried, and then unburied. She was sketching in a new notebook, her lines sharper, now cleaner. The house. The barn. The goats Joe had insisted they adopt. "I want to add a treehouse," she said. "Oh yeah," Eli smiled. "What for? Somewhere for people to sit? To watch the wind?" He nodded slowly. "That sounds like something I'd like too." She glanced up. "Do you ever think about the before?" Eli's breath caught, not because of the question, but because she asked it so gently. "Every day," he said. "But I don't live there anymore." She smiled. "Me neither." Then she went back to drawing, and Eli looked up at the leaves above them, fire orange and gold dancing in the breeze. Sometimes the most beautiful things came after the burning. That night, a new woman arrived. Her name was Annalise, 37, former Air Force, 2 tours, divorced, no kids. She barely said a word as Ellie handed her a blanket and showed her to the west cabin. But before bed, she left a note on the porch swing. "I heard this place doesn't ask for explanations." Ellie wrote back in marker on the wall next to the swing. "It only asks if you're willing to stay." 1 week later, Annalise was fixing a broken pipe in the barn with Tess. By month's end, she was leading the kitchen. By spring, she was laughing again. And so it went. They came. They healed. They stayed. Not all forever, but long enough. Eli and Ellie never married. at least not the way the world defined it. There were no rings, no vows under arches, no tuxedos or flowers. But one morning, Grace looked at them both over breakfast and said, "You two look more married than most people I know." Eli blinked. Ellie chuckled. "What makes you say that?" Eli asked. "Because you always know where the other one is, even when you're not in the same room." They looked at each other then, and something in the way their hands met across the table said more than paper ever could. On the 1-year anniversary of Red Oak Haven's founding, they held a gathering beneath the oak. No microphones, no press, just stories. Ellie read a letter from a woman who had passed through the ranch and found her brother after years apart. Tess read one of her poems. Eli didn't speak. He just stood at the back with Grace beside him, watching Ellie as the light caught her cheekbones and the wind played with the edge of her jacket. When it was over, Ellie walked to him. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said, voice thick. "It's just, I never knew you could grow something so full in a place where so much had died." She leaned in, touched his chest. "It didn't die, Eli. It was buried. And you were the one who dug it back out." That night, after the last campfire dimmed and the wind grew cooler, Eli stood on the porch again, alone. The ranch was quiet now, but it hummed with something bigger. He looked out into the dark, not afraid, not waiting, just present. And then a sound broke the stillness. Small footsteps, bare feet, a sleepy voice. "Dad." He turned. Grace stood in her pajamas, blanket clutched in one hand. "Couldn't sleep," she said. He knelt down. "Want me to sit with you for a while?" She nodded. So they sat, just the two of them on the porch swing, watching the stars. "Do you think this place will still be here when I'm older?" she asked. He looked around, at the cabins, the fields, the scars, the light. "I think it'll be here long after we're gone." She leaned against him. Why, he thought about that. Then said, "Because this place wasn't built from concrete or wood. It was built from people who decided they were more than what broke them." She didn't speak, just closed her eyes. And as he held her with the night warm and the porch creaking gently beneath them, Eli Morgan knew some legacies are written in stone. But the ones that last are lived in silence, love and second chances. Where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to know. Drop a comment below and share a little piece of your story with us. And if this story touched something deep inside, you please consider subscribing to Soul Moments Story. It's completely free, and it helps us keep bringing you heartfelt stories that honor kindness, courage, and the quiet power of redemption. Thank you truly for spending your time with us today. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in second chances.